So it's lovely to be able to wander around the boat in a shorts and t-shirt in December and do these little jobs. Normally I'll be wrapped up in the cold trying to get the after season type jobs done. Got some varnishing to do. There was always varnishing to do, and that's always a problem. Normally you're looking for 3 dry days somewhere between October and March really, which is always a struggle in England. Here of course no problem at all. So the first thing I'm going to do is this one here. It's only the doghouse and the hatch now, the butterfly hatch that are done with Epifanes, but you want to keep on top of that and not get to the point where it starts to flake, otherwise you've got to take it right back.
The high wear areas like the tow rail though have a different kind of varnish. This is a breathable, microporous varnish. It's great because the inevitable wear you get from ropes and things rubbing across it just results in a worn spot, no flaking or cracking. This varnish is easily patchable and sometimes I just do the little spots that need it. But it's been a year since the last coat, so I'm going to go through the whole boat with all the varnish and give it a couple of new coats all over. Sadly though, although the weather during the day is perfect, we are getting a heavy dew in the mornings. And I know from experience that Epifanes doesn't like this, and even if you stop varnishing by lunchtime, it doesn't dry enough not to be affected in the mornings. So it's going to have to be inside varnishing for now until we're not getting such a heavy dew. All the removable bits I can take outside to sand, less dust that way, and there's always something interesting happening behind the boat. The Spanish love their rowing. I'm not a great fan of 2-part varnish, but it really is the only way to do the sole. Certainly when you're living on board you can't have a varnish that takes all day to dry. This stuff will take about 2 hours to be touch dry, which means I can do it outside and I can then move it all inside to be out of the way of the dew in the morning. But it dries so quick it is a bit of a race against time to apply, so you've got to get all your ducks lined up and then get going. But of course the real advantage of the 2-part is when you come to do inside. This dries in about 2 hours, 4 hours, you can walk on it, so it's doable when you're living on board. It's just me on board at the moment, Judy's in the UK, which is better when you've got all the boards up. You always make such a mess when you start doing jobs inside a boat. But yeah, this is quite good. One tip I found is get a little lamp and shine it across the top of the surface. It makes it easier to see. I'm using a brush here and it's not ideal. You do get some brush marks. The tin actually says you can use a spray or a roller. That's what it says to use, and the first time I tried it with a roller and I just couldn't get it without leaving little roller marks in. It's a very short hair, short pile one that you're supposed to use, but I can get it to work properly, which is strange. Actually, usually someone once told me things that are written on a tin, if it's got lots of complicated things on there and people tend to skip them, like when you're using Epifanes and you're supposed to thin it gradually as you go up through the coats, and people don't bother. And someone once told me, well, they don't write that on there for nothing, and it's true. They want to make things as easy as possible, to look as easy as possible on the tin. So if it says you've got to use a brush with the hair from a yak from Himalayas or something, then that's what you've got to use, and they wouldn't put it on there if it wasn't really needed, because they want to make things look as easy as possible. So I tend to try and follow the instructions, but I just couldn't get it to work with a roller on here. So doing my best with a brush, but the light helps. You can shine it along and see if you've left any little marks in there before it dries, and hopefully this will all be done. That one's done. So I've done the 2 of these now, the forward cabin and the aft cabin. Do them during the day, and then I'll just do the saloon tonight before I go to bed, and then we'll do it all again tomorrow with the second coat. It's mid-January now and we're not getting as much condensation in the morning, so time for some outdoor varnishing. If we look at the inside here, you can see it's in pretty good nick actually. There's just a few bits where it's getting a little bit thin and you're getting some discoloration in the wood underneath, but nothing too much, so I'll get away with just fine sandpaper, give it a couple of coats. If we look at the outside though, we'll see that's not done quite so well. There are some bits like this bit here where I'm going to have to go all the way through with some coarser stuff and take it right back to the wood and then feather that in. I'll probably put some thin epoxy in there first, and then some lots of layers thin down and match it up with the rest. It's only really that little bit there that's got it, and a few other little bits that are getting through. So I'm going over everything here with some 240 grade sandpaper. I'm actually using wet and dry for this first rub down and giving a good clean as I go.
The finer detailed bits get a bit of a rub over with 320 to make them super smooth before drying everything off. So that's it, worst bit's done, sanding's over. Well, actually there's hot competition between sanding I think and masking. We've got quite a bit of things to mask in here with the doghouse and the edge of the toe rails and everything else. Obviously use the blue masking tape so it comes off easier. So that's the next job. I've already been round with this stuff. You'll see obviously the can's past its best. I'm actually decanting, this is a two-part one, I'm decanting the other one out into a glass container at the moment, so I want to keep it. It is expensive stuff, but it's worth every penny. I'm using it here, as you can see, just around the little joints, the scarf joints, where they might open up a little bit. Just put a tiny bit in there, it'll go through and protect that gap and stop water getting in there. If it does get in there, I know it's teak, it's it's not going to rot that quickly, but this will help and stop any of that happening. It's the same stuff actually that I've used if you watch the teak plug in the decks video, putting new teak plugs in, that I squirt some of that down the hole, so that if there's any water that's actually gone down into the core, this will go and penetrate that and stabilise that, and even if it hasn't, it's there and it will stop it happening in the future. So it's a good thing to do. So that's already done. Next job then will be to go through with the varnishes. So these are the two different varnishes that I'm using. So one, Epifanes here, which I think is the best tung oil varnish around. I really don't think it's worth trying any cheap varnishes. I did try it once when I couldn't get hold of some Epifanes on just an extra coat on the sides here, and it started to wrinkle. I had to take it all off and start again, so it's really not worth bothering with that. Epifanes, of course, is difficult to put on. You're looking at sort of 8 coats really. If you're starting from fresh, I'm going to put 2 or 3 just over the top here, and takes a bit of preparing. You go through it first of all with some meths or denatured alcohol of some sort. Don't use white spirit, that's got some oil in it, just over the top of the prepared surface. Certainly if it's raw teak, then make sure you do that because it's oily at the top, so you want to just take that off before you prepare it. But even with this, just sanding down what's there, I'll give it a rub over a tack cloth with some meths on it to do the final clean. And then put 3 coats. It does need a fine rub down with some 240, 320 in between coats. So for the rest of the boat, to save that sort of time, I have used this, which is Woodskin, International Woodskin. I think this is brilliant stuff. It's not as shiny, it's not as pretty as something that's Epifanes. I mean, I wouldn't be doing my wheel with it, which gets the best sort of 10 or 12 coats of Epifanes on there to make it look absolutely perfect. But actually for the toe rails, it's a big area. It's difficult to do, and if you do start to get wear, which you will across a toe rail with ropes and things, it get under the Epifanes and you're faced with a bigger job stripping down. This stuff just does wear down, as I showed you earlier. So when you put this on, again, it's easier. So it's really 3 coats is what they recommend. I put 4 on this when I first did it. I'll put another 1 or maybe 2 coats over the top of this now. You don't have to rub down, even on actually raw teak. You could, it says just put it straight on, but I mean obviously I didn't when I did the toe rail. The toe rail was raw teak and I did rub that down. You'll get a nicer finish with that, but then put this on, you don't have to sand in between coats. So all in all, it's a much easier product to deal with. Epifanes does need all that special care, rubbing down between every coat, progressive thinning with white spirit. I use either Epifanes own brand or International No. 1. Don't use the cheap stuff. Work your way up to the final coat just being pure varnish. It doesn't matter if it's not flowing nicely, still put a bit of white spirit in just to get that good finish. I find for the first coats, when it's really thin, it's better to use a foam brush. Some people use foam brushes all the way through. I can't get them to work, so I do use a conventional brush for the later coats. And one word of advice, if you have any of this nice latticed teak work, this is our table, don't varnish it. It's difficult to rub down and impossible to varnish. I didn't use masking tape on the doghouse windows in the end. I do think it's better not to if you can, just to cut in, because you get a more feathered edge that way. I think using masking tape, obviously you're not going to get it exactly on the edge of the teak every time, and that hard edge there might allow some water through and underneath it. So if you're good at cutting in, I think that's probably a better method.
I'm finishing up all the varnishing about lunchtime to give it time to dry, because we're still getting a little bit of dew in the morning. Don't panic if you get that. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of marking from the water that's sat on top, but just dry it off and the sun will clear that through. That happens with the International all the time. Even if you've had a few dry days, it takes several days to dry properly, and some standing water on it will make it look a little bit milky. But you just clean that off and it'll dry out in time. The issue with Epifanes is sometimes by the next day it's not quite hard enough to sand properly. If instead of getting the fine dust when you try and sand with a fine paper, you'll get a little bit sort of rolling off like this, that means it's not quite ready. So this one will take another day to dry, and I'll put the second coat on tomorrow. So there's two methods there, the International Woodskin, which is quite easy to put on and produces nice results, and the Epifanes, which is much more tricky, but if you've got some nice wood on your boat, I think it's a shame not to show it at its best. So do tell us if any of this has been useful, and obviously had any tips and hints of your own. We do have a website here with lots of extra information, so it's worth visiting that from time to time. And do follow along with the episodes of Sailing Fair Isle, which we try to make a mixture of sailing and travel and technical information. Thanks for watching.